Welcome to Insight into Iceland for day 11 of the 2021 Mid-Season Invitational. We just wrapped up the Rumble stage, had a full day of games. Spoiler, no tiebreakers today. So let's talk about what happened, the results of it, and a little nod to what's coming up next. So the first game of the day, Royal Never Give Up against Damwon Kia. This was, supposed to be coming in a match between the two best teams in the tournament, and I think the way things have finally landed out, it's probably likely that these are right now the two best teams in the tournament. I think Mad Lions fumbled a little bit yesterday, but otherwise could have been in that conversation, and I think they are all close enough together that there's not really super clear tier lists to this, but RNG and Damwon, I think, have done well enough to kind of hold on to that spot. Game started out with Gala and Ming getting multiple kills in lane and getting ahead that way. But Damwon were playing to the top side of the map, which they very rarely do. And they were chain diving Xiaohu and really setting him behind and working with Khan, doing these dives with the Scion and Udyr, playing those kind of classic tanky champions that they like to put into the top and jungle position. Canyon plays a lot of other things, but Khan playing a lot of this Scion. So they went at Xiaohu's Gnar. They got all these ganks, but it was a little more influential what RNG were picking up, I would say. Because getting a Scion or an Udyr fed isn't really how you're going to win a game. RNG got a pick on Canyon after one of the dragons that Damwon controlled, and that led to a Baron, and that kind of threatened to break the game open. But Damwon punished that Baron by arriving. They weren't there in time to actually contest the Baron itself, but they were there in time to force a fight right afterwards, and that fight led to a big ace for them. RNG had been stacking more of the dragons though. It was kind of funny the way things played out with Damwon trying really hard to deny the souls and investing a lot with throwing their bodies at it. I believe that one of them was a steal and the other one was just positional control. But the first time they denied the soul, they ended up kind of trading it for losing an inhibitor, and then the second time they denied the soul, lost the fight as a result, and that's how RNG closed the game. So this one was really back and forth. I think both teams playing really hard, but RNG kind of did more of the right things, I think, in the right places, and were in a little more control and managed to win that game out. So if we get a series between these two teams, I think it could be pretty entertaining. It could be pretty close, especially if Damwon, I think, play to get gold into the right places a little bit more and tighten up their strategy a little bit. I think it's also interesting to point out that Cryan played a Renekton mid, and Damwon let the Renekton go through, which nobody's doing. So I don't think we'll see Renekton go through again, because giving Cryan another option of a champion he can play, people were banning Twisted Fate against him, but you can't ban Twisted Fate against him and let him play Renekton. Like, it's a flex pick and all these things. I don't know. Really wasn't happy with that at all. Game 2, Pentanet against PSG. Started out with PSG getting a couple of kills in a skirmish in the bot lane. Even though, from what I remember, Chaz actually had mid prio and was leaning down to be part of it first before Maple could be, but PSG just had the jump on it, got a couple of kills. They played out that tempo into ganking mid, and then diving mid, and then diving the bot lane, and then pushing Pentanet off of the first Herald and taking it for themselves, and it just kind of snowballed from there, and was a Pentanet game, unfortunately. Game 3, RNG against Mad Lions. So this was one, if you weren't aware of the context on this one, for Cloud9 to have any chance of reaching the semifinals, they needed RNG to beat Mad, and then Cloud9 had to beat PSG and Mad today, and that would force a tiebreaker potentially. So this was a game that Cloud9 really needed RNG to win. RNG went with another Gnar pick, but they also were allowed to put Cryan on Victor, which he's very comfortable with. Mad let Varus through, which has been happening very, very rarely. And Mad Lions went for a lot of comfort on their side. They're continuing to prioritize the Rumble. They brought the Wukong in for Armut. They had a Lucian mid and a Kaisa Leona bot lane. All things that they feel very, very comfortable playing. This was a really high action game. Lots of skirmishing, lots of pace. But the main factor in it was just Mad Lions were playing just that much more tempo. They were able to push their lanes and move really well. They were able to get just slight edges in some of these skirmishes, or be in the right spots a little bit faster, be able to capitalize a little bit more on the skirmishes that they won. So they were playing with a ton of tempo. A lot of map activity from Elyoya being all over the place in his Rumble. Rumble and, the ability that he's able to clear the jungle so fast really contributes to that tempo and lets him be a few seconds earlier to plays or potential dive setups or whatever it is. Kaiser, of course, does a lot of roaming. Humanoid is getting out of mid lane a lot. So Mad got a nice early lead and kept pressing it and kept playing with that pace that they needed. Not allowing RNG to get, good setups where they could control choke points with the Morgana, Victor Varus, all of that kind of stuff. Mad Lions didn't let them feel comfortable. The lead did stall out a little bit in the mid game, but finally RNG, I don't know whether they were just getting a little antsy or they were realizing, I believe they were having trouble responding to the Lucian split push. So they forced a Baron, and Mad Lions were able to have Humanoid was in the bottom lane pushing towards the inhib, and he TP'd up in time. Mad Lions engaged at the Baron, and they won that fight and ended the game from it. So, hard to say whether RNG might have been able to wait it out a little bit longer and get a better setup than that, but I think that was conceptually the right thing to do, is they needed to create a 5v5 scenario, and it just didn't work out for them. So with Mad Lions winning that game, that mathematically eliminated Cloud9 from the tournament, which meant that Cloud9, who hadn't even played yet on the day, didn't even have a chance to win out and decide their own fate. So that was kind of sad for Cloud9, but that was the result of the game. And up next, Cloud9 went against PSG in the fourth game. PSG brought out some interesting stuff, a Nocturne top, Kiana mid with a Rumble jungle, and then a Galio support. So very high map mobility from the Nocturne Galio ults. Kiana loves to roam around and play into different parts of the map, and obviously use her ult on parts of the terrain. C9 did something a little different as well with an Aatrox. And this is another game that had a lot of fighting in all the different areas of the map. It seemed like it was going pretty evenly until Sven and Vulcan, they got a 2v2 kill bot onto Kaiwing, but then they tried to extend it and 2v1 dive Doggo, and it just went horribly wrong. They both died. It was especially disappointing because, they went for the play, Vulcan died, took turret shots, and then Sven was able to still walk away and just cut his losses, but he went back for it and tried to go for more and died as well. So that was pretty demoralizing. And PSG were just picking up just small advantages in different places, winning a few more of the skirmishes. Cloud9 were staying true to form and focusing heavily through the bot side and stacking up those dragons and really treating the dragons as of paramount importance, which in some ways they are, but as I've said before, you got to be careful what you're giving up in other parts of the map when you are doing that. And eventually, PSG won a dragon fight that led to a Baron, and now they really were in the lead and in control. There was a really close Baron fight where C9 tried to get back in it, but the gold lead on PSG was just big enough in that decisive fight. PSG wanted to really layer their ultimates, right? You get the Nocturne and the Galio going in, you get the Kiana or the Rumble using their ults to engage, and you just layer all those ultimates together. And Cloud9 were able to kind of avoid those ultimates enough to have a bit of a health advantage and a positional advantage. But PSG's, I think they were in about a 6,000 gold lead at this point. They were able to just edge out the fight, and once they got the first kill advantage in the fight, they were able to clean it up from there. So it was really close for Cloud9. I think without that messed up bot lane play, or with a little bit better approaches to a couple of these fights, they maybe could have done it. But in the end, PSG were better. They won the game from there, and that meant that even if that game could have gone differently under different circumstances, but even if RNG had managed to beat Mad Lions, if this game had gone the same way, Cloud9 would have been out anyway, so they can't really blame anyone but themselves. And PSG did well. Credit to them. Game 5, Damwon against Pentanet. I mean, I don't think there's a whole lot to say here. What I wrote in my notes was there were some awkward bot lane skirmishes, kills were being traded, but the Damwon solo lanes generated big leads, and that led to just a steadily rising gold lead and a straightforward kind of closeout from there. And then finally we had, and for what it's worth, that game didn't really count for anything. I think maybe technically RNG and Damwon might have ended up with the same record. I didn't even check because it wasn't really worth it. But and then Game 6, Mad Lions against Cloud9, the game that could have been super hyped to either force a tiebreaker or some other scenario, but it was completely irrelevant. So there's not really too much point talking about it. The teams didn't completely troll the game, but they clearly weren't putting full effort into it. Cloud9 played Callista mid, Irelia top. Mad Lions played kind of more within the meta, but you could tell they were just kind of, quote unquote limit testing, taking a lot of fights that didn't need to be taken, and nothing of real analytical value to take out of this game. Although people will get hyped about, Fudge snowballing the Aurelia, and that's exciting. And both Ilyoya and Blabber had really good KDAs and made a lot of plays and stuff like that. Cloud9 did end up winning the game, but again, not really meaningful. So the takeaways from today, I think Mad in their win over RNG really showed off the peak that they can achieve. It was really impressive. I think all the pace they were able to play with. This is the kind of League of Legends that I appreciate the most, it being in control and dictating the game, and moving through the map and to summarize it in a single buzzword, tempo. I think they've been pretty inconsistent throughout the tournament at different times, as pretty much everybody has, right? Damwon has had ups and downs. They started off the tournament really weak, ramped up. Today was a little bit of a downswing. RNG obviously dropped games to Mad today. They've dropped games to C9, to PSG, but at other times looked like very clearly the best team in the tournament. And Mad Lions had their peaks and valleys as well. But this was their highest peak, that win over RNG. I think really impressive to see what Ilyoya is continuing to do by playing with that Rumble and using its strengths appropriately. I think Carzzy is also worth shouting out as somebody that I haven't given as much attention as a lot of other people, but I think he's having a really good tournament, doing a lot of good things in lane with him and Kaiser and wanting to really scrap there, for better or worse, mostly better, but some worse. And yeah, I think Mad Lions are really worth paying attention to, and even if they are, they finished fourth in the Rumble stage, but I think if they play at or near their peak, they don't need much of an off day from the other teams to take the series. And they are candidates to win this tournament still. And I think they increased kind of the high end of what you could estimate from them with the way they played today. So kudos to them. And I want to say goodbye to Cloud9 and to Pentanet. I'm going to take more time, and I think the Run It video this week will be about taking a kind of a stepping back and taking a sober look at Cloud9. How did they actually play? I think you get a lot of people trying to massage their way through Cloud9's weaknesses at this tournament and say, oh, they were this close, and they're so much better than their record showed, and their games were so many of the games are so winnable. You take away one mistake, and I think some of those things are true. But I also think that Cloud9 did some fundamentally very bad things that cost them their overall showing at this tournament, from just really big individual mistakes that shouldn't just be hand-waved away, over to mistakes of their understanding of how to use the map, and getting exploited for kind of ineffective ways of playing the map and what they prioritize. So I'm going to try to explore all that a little more, take some time to gather all that together and do it in the Run It video. But I do think that if you swing on the other side too much and are in despair about Cloud9 finishing fifth, I mean, it was interestingly pointed out, I can't remember who was tweeting about it, one of the LEC casters, I think it was. No, it was Nelson Singh, who's now a coach with G2, but has been an LPL coach, pointing out that, aside from the 2 years where the North American team went to MSI finals, Team Liquid and CLG both doing it, the LCS team has failed to progress from this stage into the knockouts every other time. So it's either finals or nothing, and this was a nothing. But don't treat this as some I can't believe C9 wasn't in the top four, because they've almost always not been in the top four. I think what you really get this year is you can look at an underestimation of PSG talent and the PCS region, and say that this sounds like I'm making an excuse, and that's not the intent. PSG Talon were a lot better than I think a lot of people, including myself, gave them credit for coming in. Cloud9 should have been good enough to still reach top four, but didn't. And I think you don't need to despair about this, and I definitely don't think you need to start up a bunch of how can we fix NA threads on Reddit about it either. I think it was, from a very broad overview perspective, a slightly below what we might have hoped for or expected from C9, but don't panic. And Pentanet, saying goodbye to them as well. I think it was great to see how much fun they were having, and still to celebrate their achievement of getting to this stage in the first place. Good for them to beat Cloud9 and have that feather in their cap to wear on the way home. Good luck to the entire region this summer, and I hope they're able to kind of stabilize and that we'll see more of them at Worlds and get more good memories. And finally, I want to have a little bit of my own kind of old man rant about Fudge and his treatment of this tournament. I think over the last few days, I've seen a lot of really high hype levels around Fudge, and to a certain extent, he's earned it, right? And he does deserve a lot of the praise that he's been getting. His Lee Sin team fighting, very memorable. He's had some really big moments. He's had some really strong Renekton games, and a couple of times he was allowed to play it. But I think that the level of praise that has been given to him has been presented a little wrong, and I think is an overcorrection and an overcompensation for the way he was being treated earlier in the split. And to be very clear, he was getting dumped on really hard back in January. Struggled in the opening parts of the season, getting labeled the ninth or 10th best top laner even midway through the spring split by a lot of people. Would very believed that he was one of the worst top laners in the league, and I was out there trying to say, no, he's a mid-tier top laner right now. I think he's performing around like somewhere in the 4th to 6th best top laner level. And I think things have really overcompensated to this point of now, like, if you describe it, my issue with this is if you describe Fudge's performance as if he's been like 1v9ing these games, his teammates are all leaving him out to dry and throwing every game, and he's doing his best to save it, and sometimes he's able to save it, and sometimes his team is just so bad that not even Fudge can save it. Like, that's the kind of vibe that is coming out from this, and I think that's really disregarding the play of his teammates, who in some cases have thrown harder than he has. But Fudge also threw games at this tournament, sometimes in obvious ways and sometimes not so obvious ways. And I think it does a disservice to Fudge to not acknowledge the areas that he has to improve on. And I think it does a disservice to his teammates to make it seem as if they aren't doing anything right. When Blabber had some very strong games, I thought Vulcan played much more consistently and with similar highs to Fudge. I think Sven had a decent tournament overall. Perks was a little disappointing to me, unfortunately. But overall, I think you can definitely be doing a disservice to Cloud9 as a whole and what all of those players together tried to achieve if you make it all about Fudge. And then at the end of the day, if you set up Fudge as, the only one on Cloud9 who acquitted himself with honor at this tournament, you're also setting him up to come back to the LCS and to show the same, or even slightly less mistakes than he showed at this tournament, potentially get punished for them, whether it's in LCS or at Worlds if he doesn't fix it by then, and go right back to that, everybody was saying Fudge was, the best or second best top laner in the LCS, but now he's doing all of this. He actually is terrible again, and you swing the pendulum back. And I think it's not effective to have such big pendulum swings in evaluations of a player or a team or whatever it is. I think that kind of hyperbole of greatness or awfulness is just not an effective way to talk about these things. And I think also it sets up for negative outcomes and community sentiment and all these other things. So, I've been very high on Fudge consistently for a year and a half now, and I've been trying to boost him up and get people to recognize him. And I'm really glad that he's getting that recognition and that people are seeing, like, look how quickly he's growing and improving and has been for the entire last year and a half. But let's not go overboard. I think that's a dangerous road to go down, and I think it's a few steps too far along that road. I think we can reel it back in a little bit and have a reasonable and sober view of the way that these players are playing, and let's just make sure that we treat it appropriately. So that's my take on that. I really hope that doesn't come across as me trying to undermine Fudge or I don't want anybody to be happy or anything like that. I just think there are some potential negative consequences to swinging that pendulum a little bit too hard. Those are my thoughts. We actually had a selection right away of Damwon saying, since they were the first seed, they got to pick who they would face in the semifinals. They picked Mad Lions, which is, I don't know, I think Mad Lions have showed a higher ceiling than PSG, but Damwon obviously feel they've got a better read on Mad Lions and how to beat them. So we'll see those matches. I believe Friday, Saturday, Sunday is the schedule. And it should be a lot of fun in those best of fives, because best of fives are always more fun than best of ones. So enjoy those when they come up, and I'll have more thoughts on them as they play out.